Next question or comment comes from Patrick Nuer, I think it is. I think it's a silent K. I do apologise if I got that wrong. This was in response to underwhelmed by the Roland D-20. And Patrick writes, I own an RA50 and a D-110, so I know what the D-20 sounds like. I guess a D-20 must be a downer if you want a good synth. If you like the bad presets, you might get very nostalgic. I found the synth sounds that I like are very much in their synth cheapness. The built-in drum machine must be a letdown, and even worse than the Boss DR550, which I own. And the sequencer is substandard and may improve an improvement only over what simple recording function in my RA50. I still want to buy one as a master keyboard for my Roland crap rack, in brackets trademarked, and I want to see what torture looked like Roland style in the 80s. I grew up with a Korg DS8 and a C64 sequencer with an HR16, so I'm excited about what one of the first workstations could actually do. Don't know how you follow that. Yes, separate instruments of the time would have provided some better functionality, but the late 80s, before the Korg M1 stole the market, the D-20 and the Ensoniq ESQ1 gave a semi-professional musician a platform to develop on. It'd be interesting to see what you finally come up with and think of the D-20. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next question comes from Christian Siebert. And this is in response to how to trigger multiple tones from library cards on your Roland U-110. A video I did back in March 2016, a long while ago. And he writes, that's a helpful video. Thanks for doing it. I got a U-110 a few weeks ago, and it's simple, but I like that it's got a lot, and it's great value. The buttons can be really confusing in terms of what they do, but I'm getting used to them. This was the problem with a lot of the instruments around in sort of the late 80s, early 90s. They compacted all the menus down, so you had a really simplistic interface, but it meant that everything you wanted to do was buried somewhere. So I wrote back and said, great to hear another item of legacy tech has gone to a good home, rather than just being broken. Yes, the menu structure is confusing, but once you navigate it and you assign the sounds from the various sources, internal and the cards, to multiple MIDI channels, it can become a very, very powerful MIDI generator. And I kind of thought that was a fairly simple response. And normally I wouldn't put those onto Mailbag, but then we went on. So Christian writes back and says, I really like these 80s Roland rack units. I also have an MC500 and MC50 on the way. So they were the real-time sequencers that Roland introduced, which was great because you had a disk drive and you could record the sequences to the disk drive, and you could also use them for backing up sysx files. They were quite universal and quite good pieces of kit. Anyway, I've said for a long time these units gave musicians on a budget a lot of sound options. I've still said that, and it's not a lot of cash to invest to get those options for you. It's not like investing several £1,000 into a high-end keyboard. You can invest $100 or so, get one of these units, plug it into your setup, and have multiple sound options available. But yeah, the polyphony isn't great. And I've always thought about buying an MC unit to the collection, but yeah, I'll have to wait till money's less tight, to be honest. So then Christian writes back again. Yeah, I was using the Chord Gadget app on my iPad for sequencing whole songs via MIDI. It was great, like a DAW, but without the clutter. But I decided to go DAWless for making full songs. So now I've picked up an MC I'll keep on to say MPC, it's not, it's MC500, for the equivalent of £100, and it's great. The workflow is fantastic, and I love the chunky buttons. That's the whole thing about this sort of stuff, is it's got chunky buttons for big fat fingers. It makes such a lot of difference not to see the music on a piano roll. Wanted to have a more authentic experience, closer to my favourite groups of the 80s. Yeah, but your favourite groups of the 80s were all using Ataris and Amigas to generate the music by sequencing anyway. This was the point. If you wanted that authentic experience, you had to go and acquire an Amiga or an Atari ST. A lot of keyboard guys would recommend, would record and sequence on these platforms and then move to the MPC for live work. So what you would do is effectively you would build your composition up on an Atari SC, and then you would record it to the MC, so that when you were actually on stage, it was just a case of putting the disc in and hitting go, and you would set it up. The MC was a far more robust platform than in the field than a computer was back in this day. And it was easier to lug about as well, because it was, the unit was about the size of the Roland R8, I suppose, which is sort of kind of about that, and about that deep, with a disc player on one side of it. Then Christian writes back again. Yeah, I've toyed with the idea of getting one of those. I actually wish there was a recreation of the main software used back then for a standard modern computer. Well, you can run an emulator. A bit like a DAW, but without all the clutter and extra power that comes with a modern DAW, which turns me off using this for sequencing. Well, there are options for running emulators. That's the bottom line for a modern machine. However, if you watch the RMC channel, which is the Retro Man Cave channel, you will see him upgrading old Amigas with Raspberry Pis to provide the horsepower, memory and Wi-Fi and easy storage solutions that allow you to run an Amiga with the appropriate interfaces and software and more oomph. Christian then writes back and says, interesting, I will check that out. I do record into my desktop and then for mixing of songs, but other than that I have a DAW-less setup. I'm not a purist, thank God for that, and people should choose what approach works for them, and I completely agree with that. Since I'm looking at a computer stream for work, I do like punching the chunky MC500 keys for the purpose of sequencing. I can understand that as well, because I spend most of my day looking at a computer screen and thinking, ooh, what idiot has written that? For multi-track recording, I recommend Multitrack Studio software. Has a really tight MIDI sync to my MC500 through a UM1 adapter. You just need to have a few empty bars at the start and then record one track at the time. I haven't used the UM1 adapter, and I haven't used that piece of software. But the MPC 500 setup you described is the basic setup that was used back in the day for live work. That's the bottom line. And I agree, basically, whatever gets the job done.